we're going to try to get through here in about an hour or less if possible. We're going to try to give you guys the really important information about your junior year, really kind of like making a pretty big transition from looking at mainly high school level success. So like really kind of setting students up in 9th and 10th grade to kind of get through high school successfully and as productively as possible. And moving into really starting to look at junior year is really when we start paying really close attention to things like getting ready for college or post-secondary options. And we'll go through a few of those as well. There's a few other things that we'll consider tonight. I'll give you guys a couple reminders about some important information that you guys will need to know. We'll take a quick look at some of the transcript information. I know that we probably have looked at that together a little bit in the past, but we'll look at that as well. We are changing our individual learning plan processes this year with the addition. So I'm not, thank God, the only school counselor here anymore. So we have a 9th grade school counselor that's also working with our next door 8th grader. Her name is Lisa Dolberg. She's great. She's wonderful. And so with that addition and with some, ideally we were actually looking at doing 9th and 11th grade meetings. I also meet with the seniors. With her addition, it really makes sense to do that starting this year. So we're going to be splitting that up and really focusing on having meetings with 9th graders for that true academic planning. The 11th grade is really going to turn into more of that kind of let's talk about what's going to happen next and really looking into college or options after high school, because college is by no means the only option that students have when they finish high school. We will spend a lot of time talking about, though, that is main focuses of some of these meetings because it's pretty complex. There's a lot of things in planning and implementation that has to happen over the next year to 2 years to really make that kind of goal a reality for many students. We'll talk a little about testing, so a little bit about what's coming up in the next month, plus what will really start coming down the pipe really in December, January timeframe regarding kind of those college level admissions tests. And we'll spend some time if you guys have questions or things you really want me to talk about. As I go through, this is not a full agenda. As I go through, I often find myself remembering to talk about certain things and things come up, questions get asked. And so by no means do we need to stick to this agenda. If you guys have something you really want to talk about as a group, I'm very happy to do that as well. But a couple of just reminders as we jump in that the school's website did change about 2 years ago or so. But my website also changed a little bit. Well, mine and Lisa's website. You can find it under the programs menu. Looks fairly similar. It looks different, but like the menu items are the same when you're on your phone or a mobile device. But school counseling is where our device or our area is located. And it kind of looks like this. So it's got a little bit of a design refresh. We kind of made it hopefully a little bit easier to use as a parent or a student. At the top, there's some quick links. At the end, I will try to remember to pull up the website and kind of just give you a quick overview of some of the important features that you can find on here. We try to put a lot of energy and time into it, but it's really more about putting time into helping you guys access anything you guys might need. One area that I'll point out right now is going to be this grade level resource folder. So this is a folder that we have on Google Drive. All of your students have their Google accounts. Many parents and adults use Google Drive for a lot of different things. You do not have to have a Google Drive account to be able to access this. You can still download PDFs and things like that. But each grade level will have a folder that we've created and we maintain. And that's something that when we get resources or we get, for example, the slides from this presentation, it's probably not on there quite yet, but they'll probably be on there tomorrow. So we'll print the PDF of these. So if you want to go back and look at these at some other time, there's oftentimes some planning guides to be thinking about that you guys can access or download. The other thing is, like, if you guys are, I know parents really like to research stuff, and I get a lot of emails and say, hey, this is a great book, or this is a great article that I found while browsing the internet or had sent to me. Send those to me as well, because I like to keep those and put those in that resource folder, because most likely if you found it interesting, there's additional parents or myself that would also find it pretty interesting as well. So we try to just make them pretty accessible and shareable. So that's a great tool as well. And we'll go through a few other items on that a little later. Another reminder, we are kind of coming down to the wire a little bit here. Hopefully you guys have seen something about this on the website. We sent out a couple emails about it. We do have a pretty exciting event coming up on Saturday. So it's only a few days from now, and the registration actually closes on Thursday. From 3 to 5 o'clock, we're going to be having the college admissions case study. This is the second time we will be doing this here at the high school. And what the event actually is there's going to be 7 different representatives from a few colleges from all around the country that come out. And we're probably sitting at about 200 people coming right now. It's open to not just our students, but primarily it's us, Sugar Bowl Academy, Tahoe Expedition Academy. We are the people that put it on. We also throw the invite to Truckee as well. But so they'll be sending a few students and parents, but it's open to both parents and students. It's a great opportunity to learn about the college admissions process on both sides. But what we found is that even us as professionals in this industry, we only get to see many times part of the process of that college world up to a certain point. That's usually when you pay your money and hit submit. After that, it goes into the netherworld, and people make life-changing decisions about you or your child, and it comes back and it either causes them to rejoice or totally crushes them. And so this event kind of helps demystify what actually happens and how difficult it actually is, and how it's not always kind of as black or white as you might think it might be. So you, the people that come to this event, will become basically part of the admissions team, and you actually will read 3 fake applications from start to finish. And you guys, as a group of probably about 20 or 30 with an admissions representative leading you, will make decisions on who gets in, who gets waitlisted, and who gets denied, and why. So it really kind of sheds some light onto that college admissions process. So if you haven't come last year, and even if you have, there are different applications, different reps, it's a different experience. Please check it out. We do require registration, so we do have a maximum amount that we can actually fit. We can't put 50 people with a representative. That's not a very productive group. So we are capped at about 210 people. So we're 10 or 15 people away from meeting our max. The good news is I actually got one of the reps to agree to being recorded. So we'll also, just like we do these meetings, we're going to put it on YouTube live that day, but also recorded, so you guys can pull it up if you can't make it that day. I know many times Saturdays or weekends are busy for people, or you have different events. So you can pull it up at a different time throughout the year and just check it out and see how it works. If you want to register, please do that. It's run through Eventbrite. And we only, like I said, have a few spots left, and every person will need a ticket. So if you're coming, make sure you register your child if they're coming as well. Another reminder is community service. The main reason I point this out is because you're 1 year away from being senior parents, and senior parents oftentimes forget about community service, as do your children, and it becomes May, and that becomes a problem. And then I have to become the bad guy, because then I have to nag about getting all these community services hours done. So if they continue to do their yearly expectation, which for the next 2 years will be 8 hours each year, they will be doing just fine. They'll meet all their hourly requirements as long as they've done in the years past for that total 30-hour requirement. Occasionally, students tell me that doesn't really matter. I'll still graduate, all that kind of stuff, and that's not true. So I just want to make it clear, like, that is board policy, just like taking and passing your 4 years of English is. If you don't do community service hours and you got straight A's in all of your high school classes, you will not participate in graduation. You will not receive a high school diploma. Okay, so just emphasize that your students should be working on that throughout the year.
Is there somewhere to go to find out how many hours they've completed?
Their pathways teachers, the pathways teacher should be able to look it up. I couldn't send it out necessarily to everybody, but if you wanted to email me too, I could also look it up. I'm kind of the keeper of the master document.
Okay, thank you.
We expect 1 to 2 hours a night as you get older. Okay, this junior year does really change. With the addition last year of our AP Human Geography course that many of the 10th grade students took, we kind of opened up the opportunity for AP courses earlier than we have been able to in the years past. Historically, the junior year kind of is the year when it really starts hitting them. Since some of your students may have already taken that, they might have a little bit of a taste of what, for example, an AP or upper division level course might expect of them. But many of your students might be taking more than one this year. Okay, so it will be extra important going through junior and senior year to set up and really kind of help them facilitate that outside of school time. That's the biggest thing that we see students struggle with, is they might get their work done here at school, or maybe not. But most of them that are doing the AP courses are usually pretty dedicated at school. But many times they're pulled in so many different directions outside of school, whether that's for sports or community service or other things that are going on, family life, relaxing, having that big brain break, is that sometimes that balance of home kind of work, which is not just the homework that they're assigned, but actual studying, reviewing, preparing for tests, all those types of things, sometimes gets either chunked, where they have like a week of like crazy stress where it's kind of a health issue, or forgotten completely. And so I want to encourage, like, you guys are key partners in helping your child create that balance. And sometimes it feels like you nag them. Sometimes you feel like you're walking that fine balance as well. So I want to encourage you guys that it's okay to kind of like help them organize and help them strategize, but you don't have to do it for them. Encourage them throughout that process though, but like doing things like helping them set up a space in your home, maybe where they have that availability, that quiet space, maybe that's distraction free from a TV or whatever might be, pulling their focus away from some of the work where they can say, this is where I'm going to be doing my work at night. Encouraging them to try to get that done sooner rather than later so they can relax a little later at night, maybe get to bed at a decent hour. So junior and senior year does ramp up in terms of the expectations of outside of school studying. Okay. Like I said, with the AP coursework, one of the big things that we're going to be pushing this year is going to be trying to get your students, if they are taking AP courses, to really start that, look at this entire year as a study process if they're going to be taking that AP exam. Okay, we've wildly increased our access to AP courses. We've wildly increased our AP student enrollment and test taking numbers. We have not wildly yet increased our student pass rate. Okay, so I think that is our next kind of phase of a push. We've kind of done the work, the front end work of getting students where they need to be in the classes. And now it's really about helping them develop those skills to successfully take and pass those things. And I think what ends up happening is students tend to start the year thinking like, oh yeah, that's just like a test that I take here at school where it's, 30 questions, it takes me an hour, I can use my notes and things like that. Okay, that's not an AP test. So it's really important. We're going to try to really push that. You'll hear a lot about that. We're going to do some early test prep stuff. I'm going to work with them on anxiety and different things throughout the year to help support them a little bit more throughout this year to help them be successful if they choose to take those AP exams. Because they're 3.5 hour long full year content exams. So they're pretty big deal. Yeah.
Will they be coming to you for that test prep, or you'll be?
I will probably be pushing into different classes. So a big focus will be that 10th grade AP Human Geography course, which I realize is probably a little late for this group.
Right.
But that's the group that, based on our data, struggles the most. It also is the group that we can hypothetically get the most bang for our buck for, because they are the younger group that we can work on throughout the year. So that's going to be our hyper focus, but we'll be working with all grades on helping them get ready for those AP courses and AP exams at the end of the school year.
So you'll be working with all.
So I'll be doing different things throughout different ways. So like we might offer a test prep RTI self-select type thing. So like if a student wanted to come and join in a workshop on, say, study habits for AP courses, I could offer that. I'll probably work on in different levels. I'll try to hit at least each grade level once or twice.
So can you notify the parents when you do that?
Yeah, so typically I'm going to try, and I'll show you at the end where you can kind of keep an eye on. It would be a good idea to make it a habit to go to what we're calling the month at a glance page, and I'll show you where to access that. It has our school calendar, which I post all of my events to as well, plus a bunch of different goals in different areas, plus a parenting goal that you guys can read that we're going to update on a monthly basis. So you guys should, beginning of each month, make it a habit. I'll show you where to find that tonight. It's on our school's webpage, but yes, it'll be communicated as I set those dates and set those things out. But yes, definitely. Yeah, totally. So that's going to be, yes.
Can we somehow, as a school, do a better job with trying to line up dates? Because Murphy couldn't even take that AP because of regionals for golf. So
unfortunately, the dates for all of the College Board tests, so that includes SAT, PSAT, AP, ACT. ACT is a different organization, but ACT, those are all worldwide dates that are set on a worldly level. So every single date of the AP exam, those 2 weeks, they are a week later this year. Okay, so that's something to know, where normally they're the first 2 full weeks of May. They are going to be the second and third week. I've actually already plugged in the window in the school's calendar, so you could look in May and see when they would be. If you actually looked up, if you Googled AP test dates 2018, you can see exactly when their test dates are for each of the courses that your students enrolled in. Those are actually set 2 years in advance. We have complained and complained. Well, I have complained and complained to the NI2A about why the heck are you booking, regional championships for track or whatever it is during our 2-week AP test window when you're going to have a third of your students that are athletes wanting to participate in both.
Right.
You're putting people, both the coaches, parents, us at the school, between a rock and a hard place and making students choose, which seems unfair to me. But yeah, unfortunately, those are nationally set dates that we don't have any ability to change. Part of it's about test security.
No, but I'm just talking, can we work with athletic departments on?
So that's again, that's a state athletic department level. And their response was, we have to pick a date. If we moved it somewhere else, it's going to impact someone else's state testing. If we moved it this way, it's going to impact other things. So neither side really seems to be really able or really willing to budge. And as much as I would think the NI2A would be the one to kowtow to the national worldly organization of the College Board, they're pretty set in their ways, I think. So, but we've all, I've sent multiple emails. I've talked to them on the phone. Lord Deluria has talked to them on the phone, explaining we've had other things with other tests that are frustrating as well. But yeah, that's unfortunately sometimes the reality of that high school process is you occasionally, unfortunately, have to choose. But hopefully that won't line up on any of your students' test dates this year, but I can't promise. We can skip this. We talked about that. So let's take a quick look. And I realize I apologize that this is small. I neglected to make a copy of this and hand them to you on paper. I should have done that. Hopefully you can see enough of this to kind of help me walk you through this. How many guys did we meet with for the ILP? We kind of looked at your students' transcripts a little bit. Okay, so I'll kind of briefly just remind you. There are a few changes that I just want to highlight. Number one is just remember that this is where many of your classes are going to show up with the grades. There's little identifiers on the left-hand side of each of those boxes that identify college preparatory classes, and also which classes go into things like these academic GPA bars up here. Okay, the credits you see at the left column has attempted, so that's the credits that your student tries. If your student gets a no pass or an F, they will attempt 5 or 1, and then they'll receive 0. Okay, but as long as they receive a D- or better or a pass in pathways, they will receive the full credits that they have attempted. Okay, so it's not a partial credit system where if you get a D, you get 4.5 credits. If you get a C, you get 3 or something like that. You get them all whether you pass it or not. One of the difficult things that if your student is struggling in a class is sometimes when they fail or really struggle in that first semester. Okay, and I often get questions, and it's difficult on our schedule because we have that full year schedule that if a student fails first semester, we can't pull them out and put them somewhere else for that second semester. So really that's kind of another rock and a hard place thing where if the student struggles, we don't have any alternative placement for them. So they really have to kind of try that second semester and hopefully do okay. And potentially look at taking it again in the following year, depending on the course that they might have that struggle in if they are not earning credits or not. Typically C's are better or good to move forward. We'll move students forward into next level coursework with a D, but it would have to be kind of a conversation with the parent and the teacher to kind of see what the issue was. Many times it might not be an understanding issue. Maybe it's an attendance issue or a work completion issue and that kind of thing. Down at the bottom, again, we report 6 different GPAs. That has not changed. The first one is our academic GPA. That's going to be all the classes up here that do not have an asterisk. That basically excludes things like PE, pathways, health, and a few other classes thrown in there. But most of our courses are considered core academic classes. So most of our courses that your students will take will fall in these first 2 as well as this bottom one, which includes every single A through F grade. This is one area that has changed. I actually had to white it out. Because we don't really have good example transcripts with your class rank completely gone. So your class rank is actually no longer being reported by our school. They will still see all 6 of the different GPAs, including the weighted and unweighted GPAs on things like college applications and scholarship applications. But that overall class rank of who's number 1, who's number 2, will not happen from here on forward. Okay, so you guys are the second class technically that will be going through with the no class rank. Does anybody have any questions about that? Usually I have some questions about the class rank and how it impacts college or anything like that. You may want me to go a little more in depth in that. Hopefully I kind of covered it with you guys a little bit at the meetings last year as well. And then finally, one thing that your students did do, likely today in Pathways, was go through with their transcript. Last week, I think they should have gone through their transcript with all their high school graduation requirements. They bubbled in and double check my work of where they're at in terms of meeting all their high school graduation requirements. Today, if they didn't do it last week, they might have done that activity today as well. But they also went through their A through G requirements. Okay, so I have two forms that I have students use. So I have a copy of their transcripts just like this, and they have a form that lists all of their graduation requirements and a form that lists all of those A through G requirements. These are two different things very closely tied together, and they went through and just checked off their progress to date. Okay, and so I think I did pretty good because I only had one student come down and ask me a question and they were okay. And usually if I ever make any oops or like oversights, there's a flood of students running through my office. Oh, I don't have English, I don't have stuff like that. But luckily that didn't happen this year. But they should be checking, and that's something that I would encourage you guys to ask your students about. Hopefully they kept that paper. Hopefully they can show you. If not, you can always log on to Aries and print out a copy of their transcript that way, and you can I can even provide a copy of those forms that I send out to the students to use as well. I think that's pretty much it for the review. Does anybody have any questions about the transcript at all? I just really want to highlight those really key 3 areas. Another reminder that we do have our AddDrop policy on Friday. Okay, so if a student does need to change or add classes, hopefully they've done it already. It's kind of a little late to change classes in my opinion, but that's kind of like what our school policy is. But they do have through Friday to drop classes and potentially add more classes if they still need to. So let's talk a little bit, let's transition a little bit to kind of like talking about not even senior year, but really what happens after senior year. Because really we kind of start thinking with the end in mind, and then we kind of backwards map that thought process into what next steps need to happen. So there's a couple different options. These are not all of them by any means. These are just the main popular ones. Here at North Tahoe High School, we do have a strong college supporting culture. Okay, so we do encourage that pretty strongly. By no means is it an expectation. By no means do we think less or differently about a student who doesn't go to college. It's just that is kind of what the majority of students report to us is what they want to do. It is also our opinion that it's a strong alternative or a strong post-secondary option for many of our students. Many of the 4-year college options that we have, the 2 main California systems, so those are going to be our 2 most popular results in application schools for our seniors that are going to be finishing high school. So the University of California system or UC system, so we use a lot of acronyms, and I'll make sure to try to explain what those are, or the CSU system or California State University system. Okay, those are our 2 most popular ones with the 9 UCs and the 23 CSUs. Those are also probably the easiest applications. Okay, so that's going to be something to know. Every application is going to have a little bit of a different process. It should pretty much be the same once your student gets there next year. Every couple of years, they do go through changes, but the UC just recently changed a few things with what's called their personal insight questions, which used to be called personal statements, which are short answer kind of essays. So they just changed and updated that last year. CSUs has not changed in a long time. It's the easiest application your student will potentially fill out. Takes them probably half hour to 40 minutes max. And you can apply to all 23 with a click of a button. You just better have your credit card ready. But it's really easy. And we'll kind of go through each of those a little bit more in depth in a second. Private schools, that's going to have a myriad of different options out there. Okay, there's a major popular one is something called the Common Application, which is an organization that basically has a little over 600 schools that partner with them that provide a one platform application tool that they can then kind of like apply to many different schools in one spot. Private schools also will typically have different options. There's another option called the Coalition app, which is not super popular yet, but you might read about it. It's new as of last year. So you could have, if you're following along with anything having to do with college, you probably read something about a Coalition app, and that's something new. It's not super well used yet, so I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about it. There are a few universities, though, for example, University of Washington, that are only using that particular application. So just keep an eye out if you're looking for some of those. Private schools also have what's called institutional applications. And those are going to be, they might do a Common App, but they might also have their own application that they developed in-house and process in-house. Typically, students that look at that option are usually only applying maybe to one school that might be on the Common Application. They don't really need to do that. And it usually is easier doing institutional apps if you're not trying to do a bunch of them. They are looked at the same. So there's a group called NACAC, or the National Association of College Admissions Counselors, which I'm a part of, that sets out what they call the statement or the statement or the what do they call it? School practices for professional agreement. I forget, it's SP, it's an acronym of some sort with a bunch of P's and a bunch of S's. But basically what it does is it sets out an agreement that all the colleges that are part of this organization agree to follow. And one of those things is that they will not be penalized for using one application or another. Okay, so they have to consider each the same. And then there's also out-of-state public schools. Okay, most of the time that's going to be a less popular option for our students, unless, for example, they're looking at things like UNR. Most out-of-state public schools, you're going to be paying out-of-school or out-of-state prices with not out-of-state financial aid from those out-of-state private schools, which we'll talk about briefly in a minute as well. So most of the time, those top three are going to be our more popular options, with the top two being the highest level of applications that we see out of our high school system here. In the four-year college level. Community college are 2 years. There's a lot of different words that we use to describe this type of school. So junior college, 2-year college, community college, all means the same thing. Similar to like colleges and universities. Who knows what the difference between, I don't know if you have any, if anybody here has other people that I asked this question, who knows what a difference between a college and a university is? A little trivia. Anybody know? Are you afraid to answer on YouTube? Yeah. So the main difference, or the best answer I was able to find, is basically a university is comprised of several smaller colleges. Okay, so like University of UC Berkeley is composed of like the College of Business, the College of Letters and Sciences, and things like that, where a college in itself is typically made up of departments, of not larger organizations. So that's the main difference. But when you look at them, they really essentially mean the same thing. Okay, unless you're going to the UK, then college means something completely different. But community college also has those different kind of words that are used to describe them, but they mean the same thing. Junior college, 2-year college, community college, all mean the same thing. There's 112 in California, so there's a large number of them. Okay, they're designed to serve local populations. All right, so they're our closest one. Actually, it's technically like Tahoe Community College in South Lake, which I think is oftentimes looked over for Sierra College, which is main campus is down in Rockland. So that's where the majority of students will take their coursework. But they have sub campuses. For example, our closest one is in Truckee, where we do have a number of students take, for example, like English through, or things like that, through what's called academic enrichment. But junior colleges are also a great option. They can be. Okay, when we talk about financial aid, usually it kind of works its way down. So University of California is going to be a little bit pricier than the CSU system. Private schools typically start out a little pricier than, say, some of our state programs, because they're usually not funded by things like taxes, federal or state money potentially. So they usually have a much higher sticker price. And just like buying a car, though, it can be it can differ widely. Okay, so I don't want you guys, if you guys are looking at private schools or out-of-state schools, to necessarily be totally shocked right off the back by seeing $60,000 a year. Okay. It could be that much, but for most people, it's not. Most people, it ends up typically being somewhat closer, usually to like our UC in-state prices without much aid. Okay, kind of that $30,000 a year, which is not cheap, but it's also not like you have to get a second mortgage on your house to make your child go to a private school. So don't be super surprised. They have typically much larger endowment to be able to provide additional things like merit aid, where maybe a UC or CSU cannot. They're pretty strictly need-based aid. So that's just something as well. Community college many times has the persona and the perspective of being cheaper, and many times they are. But just like with private schools, sometimes they're not. Part of a major component of 2-year college is going to be where you go to college, living. Okay, which parents, I know you might not want to hear this, but your cheapest option is let them live at home. You're going to save so much money. Okay, but it might be worth it to take that second mortgage out if you can get them out of the house and move them to Santa Barbara or something. But many times when you're looking at like the cost of college, that 2-year college is assuming that your child is living with you at home. Okay, if you're living out of the home and off campus, because there's only 2 or 3 junior colleges that have dorms, and they're very coveted spaces. Sierra College is actually one of them, but I think they only have like 112 or something. If they're living off campus, this option and this option end up being very close together. more close than sometimes people would think. Usually it's still a little bit cheaper, but it's usually not too far off. The main difference will be the tuition cost, but depending on your finances, that might be fairly similar. Trade and vocational schools, that's going to be like Universal Technical Institute or UTI, WyoTech, a lot of things that are very specific, usually a little bit shorter than 2 years, usually like a year to year and a half programs to specifically train people for a specific industry or typically a more specialized career rather than just going out with a high school diploma and getting a job, becoming a mechanic, becoming a plumber, a welder, tradesman, something like that. You also see a lot of like culinary trade schools, so becoming a pastry chef and stuff like that. Going straight to a career is a great option depending on what industry you're looking at. Okay, a lot of times, sometimes students that are really into computers, you don't necessarily always need a degree to become an awesome coder or an entrepreneur if you have financial backing and really, a lot of smarts and understanding of how things work in the business world. I would still encourage students in those industries. It always pays off typically to have that degree to kind of back up and fall back on if maybe your business fails or if you don't want to get indicted for tax fraud because you don't know how the books work, things like that. People also are considering kind of a fluctuating, I think, interest in the military depending on what's going on in the world. Military, the Peace Corps gap year is also another popular one that we see up here, especially with our ski academy students. And I think gap years are a great opportunity used right, okay, and used for the right purpose. My kind of 2 cents in 1 minute synopsis of a gap year. So gap year is basically a student will take 1 year off, sometimes more, but typically you see 1 year before basically returning to that application process, that kind of college or post-secondary option pursuit to do different things. Up here, a lot of students really want to pursue skiing to a very high level. And that might be very intense training, very intense travel, and things like that. So that's a big reason why a lot of students up here in our school take a gap year. Other students, they want to travel, they want to work, they want to save up money, a lot of different things. Okay, so that's something that when students express interest in a gap year, my main goal is to figure out what they hope to do with that year and what they hope to learn. If my goal is to sit around and play Xbox for a whole year, probably not a good use of gap year. If my goal is to maybe work on my skiing, work on something that's really going to potentially help me grow as a person, sometimes, volunteering, going and doing a mission trip, going and traveling is not always a bad thing, but you have to do it with intentions to how's this going to better myself as a student and as a person. When they do take gap years, some schools will do what's called, let you do something called deferral. Okay, so you can actually apply in your senior year, be admitted, and then actually basically submit that I'm going to take a year off, and then they basically save your spot for the next year. Most of that time, that's going to be out of state, smaller, less competitive schools. You're not going to find hardly any, if any, state schools, UCs, or CSUs that will defer you to next year. It's going to be kind of like, typically less selective institutions or less crowded institutions that will do that. In the case of a student that does a gap year that does not do deferral, what they'll end up doing is basically taking that year and kind of in the fall of the year after they have left high school, they will then have to basically go through that application process again. The hard part there is there's not quite as much support. I always tell students that take gap years, I'm happy to help out. They want to come and set up an appointment with me. I'll help them out with applications. I mean, I had just last year a student who took like 2 years off and really competitively skied. Applied to Vermont. I went back. I had to do common application, and I had to remember who she was, and like write her, write her recommendation letter and things like that. I remembered her very clearly, but she, it was like a little bit surprising though, because we weren't expecting it. So we had to kind of pull some information back up. So if you are doing that, just encourage your students to keep those lines of communication open. After that could be a good year to study abroad. We don't really encourage study abroad in high school. Just because it really impacts your flow towards graduation. Now, those post-secondary options, we feel like it's probably a better fit for that college world. We can actually offer you international education, usually in tandem with another university or the university that they send with you. So that would be something to consider as well. Talk a little bit about comprehensive review. So if you can look at this picture, I might have used this example before, but it really does a really good job of explaining how colleges really take looks at different student attributes. If you want to describe what this tree might look like based on that picture, what do you think it might be? You guys are a shy group.
Old.
Old, okay.
Weathered.
Weathered. How do you know? How do you know it's old, for example?
Large.
Okay, so maybe it takes up the whole
Solid.
picture. What if I asked you, like, what color was it at the top? Has it been struck by lightning? Is it living? Couldn't tell, right? That's because that is our typical view of what college admissions looks like. It's a very zoomed in, very specific look at a student. And I'll come back to what there's really one major group that really does that. Okay, and I'll come back to that in a second. But this is, I would say about 85–90% of schools out there do a version of more of this type of view. A more zoomed back. I can look at this and say it's big. You know, it probably is pretty old. It's alive. It's it's a beech tree. I don't know. Not a pine tree. Things like that. You know, it has attributes that you can really tell about that tree based on looking at the full picture. Okay, this is what typically is called holistic or comprehensive review. Okay, and this is something that most schools, most of your private schools, even up to the UCs do a little bit of an abridged version of this. The one school system that most of our students apply to is the CSU system. They do this. So that is you in the CSU system. And it's unfortunate in my book, they do what's called eligibility index admissions. What that means is, like I said, that application is really short, probably the easiest application you'll submit. It's because pretty much they're asking you for your classes, for your GPA, and your test scores. There's no essay, there's no recommendations, nothing apart from basically that piece of paper. And that's the hardest part, because that's really what gives people the anxiety about college, is like, I am this piece of paper. And like I said, other schools, you're not. CSUs, you are. Okay, so that's just something to know, is that it changes how we approach things with the CSU system. The good news with that bad news is most of our students, even with students who have like 2.5 GPAs and test scores below 1,000, can still get admitted to CSU campuses. It may not be Cal Poly or San Diego State, but there's 23 of them. And that is their design, is to serve our California high school students. They're rough. They will tell you, like, if you meet our A through G requirements and you have a 3.0 or higher, 2.5 below 3.0, you can still get in. You have to do certain things. But if you have a 3.0 or higher and meet those A through G requirements, you'll get into a CSU somewhere. So they'll tell you that. That's the hard part, though, is like, they might not want to go to CSU East Bay or somewhere like that, where it's, you know, there's usually 5 or 6 CSUs that people really have their eyes on. And those are typically the harder ones to get into. But most other schools, private schools and UCs, do this comprehensive review. This is an example of what the UCs look at. And every UC is a little different. All right, so when you're looking at what UCs look at, they basically pull together all of their professors, all of their admissions folks every year, and they have what's called a faculty senate, and they decide on what their admissions priorities are. And typically it's comprised of a bunch of this kind of stuff. But for example, UC Santa Cruz, they might say, we're really concerned about this quality senior year program of study. We want to see students really pursue their academics to their full potential all the way through their senior year. That's going to be up there on the list for us. Whereas UC Berkeley might say, hey, most of our students that apply are pretty strong students. We really want to know who has special talents, achievements, or awards. Who is really going above and beyond outside of school to be involved, to impact their community, to doing certain things extracurricularly that maybe can bring some more life to our campus. So they set these different priorities. Almost every school, when you're looking at post-secondary colleges, are going to focus, their biggest thing is going to probably be grade point average, grades that go along with that grade point average, and what they call strength of schedule or courses taken, that kind of thing. Those are almost always going to be pretty high up on that list. But everything else can really fluctuate. So that's an example of that piece. Another thing that sometimes, and I even had a conversation about it today with a student, is, well, my GPA is not that good. I'm not even going to apply to a four-year college, even though I want to go there. I was like, why? This person did not have a horrible GPA. It wasn't above a 4.0, but it was not by any means poor. And so I think many times students look at their GPA and think that, you know, you have to basically have a 4.0 or higher to get into any college, and which is completely false. And so one of the things that I kind of work with students to kind of emphasize is that, especially with these comprehensive review schools, there are other ways. Say your GPA is a little bit lower than maybe what you would like. Maybe you have a 3.5 or 3.2 or 3.0 or even lower. If you have other areas that you can like really stand out in, and by standing out doesn't mean you have to like win the national spelling bee. Like things that you're doing consistently that really help you, that can help define who you are, how you've learned, how you've grown. That can make up for areas maybe of less or deficient qualities that maybe you're not fully meeting yet. So that's something that I really just wanted to emphasize is like your GPA is important. The classes you take are important, but there are ways to make up for any potential pitfalls or oops items that might come across your way. Okay, so I wouldn't discourage your student from basically cutting. I told her by not applying, you're basically putting the no decision in your hands, which I think is what they wanted. I think that students do that. They kind of self-sabotage that process sometimes because they'd rather be the ones that said, I didn't get in because I didn't try, versus I didn't get in because I put my name in the hat and it just didn't work out. So I would encourage your students, don't be afraid to try. The worst thing that I could see a student do is want to do something and not pursue it because they were too afraid of maybe a rejection. Okay, that's happened. You know, most likely every student that applies to college will be rejected somewhere if they apply well. Okay, and here's kind of this is kind of the rough overview. Everybody should have probably a little bit different list. This is kind of the agreed upon, I guess, formula, for lack of a better word, for most people in the college admissions world. Kind of like, look at this. You can have 4 in one area, you can have 1 in another area, but this kind of gives you a diverse group of applications. And we encourage that diversity because just like your stocks and bonds, you don't want to put all your money into one spot. So 2 reach schools. So reach schools are going to be something that maybe you are that 3.8 student, that 3.5 student. You know, that could be a school like Cal Poly, where the average admissions GPA, for example, might be a 4.0. It might be a little higher. That potentially could be a reach school. You might fall maybe outside of kind of what the typical quote unquote average might look like for that individual institution, either on a local level or a national or state level. That would be considered kind of like a reach school. You're kind of like, the statistics are a little bit against you in that, maybe that set of schools. Target schools, so a couple of those, typically that should be your largest subset of schools, and that typically means you did pretty good research. Okay, you've kind of looked for schools that have the things that you need as a student. They have potentially the major you're looking at. They're in a location that you are attracted to. They're in a size, they have a pedagogy that is what you're looking for as a student. Like, are they hands-on? Are they more, sit and get? Are they more lecture-based? That kind of thing. Are they far enough from home? Are they close enough to home? Those are the things that, like, if you have all those things together and you have many of those things aligning, those are probably pretty good fits. And also, academically, from an admission standpoint, you should be relatively close. You could be below, but it shouldn't be like, 8 or 9 GPA points away. That would be a little bit of a big stretch in terms of calling something a good fit school. But if you're a couple away, that's totally within that kind of good fit range. And then a couple safety schools. And I hesitate to use the word safety. I don't like that word. That's just kind of how we describe it. I would say those would be more like, these are the schools that I am pretty positive about. Okay, I have a couple qualities maybe about me. It might be my GPA, it might be my test scores, or other things that I've done that put me kind of maybe a little bit ahead of that curve, ahead of that average group that says my admissions probability is a little bit higher in these schools. Another good indicator to look at is the admissions percentage or admissions rate for different schools. Okay, that's often found. They many times will put it right on their college admissions website. Sometimes it's a little harder to find there, so you can use things like Naviance or College Board's Big Future. Great websites which they publicly publish, sometimes to a fault. Okay, many times you'll see them potentially, throw up their U.S. News and World Report, #1 school in the world, whatever it is. Most college access folks and even college admissions folks kind of say hooey to the whole ranking thing. Most of it's a marketing and a money-making scheme. I kind of even say hooey to all the words that they give out to like high schools and stuff. It's kind of fun to get, but it's like, really you're looking at like 2 things, which are like 5 years old that no one really has access to or really pays attention to. So it's a cool honor, but it's the same thing with the colleges, that most of the time it's like outdated information. And most of the time there's a lot of like under the table changing of money, under the table exchanging of favors and things like that happen that determine the ranking, not necessarily the quality of their education. There's a few resources that I would recommend looking at if you're looking for like how things rank together. One of them that gets published every year by an organization is called the FISC Guide to Colleges, FISKE. It's readily available for like $20 on Amazon. I have like last year's edition in my office that I offer students or parents if you want to come make copies of certain schools. They go through about 300 or so different colleges throughout the United States and do kind of like a 2-page synopsis that's relatively unbiased. That's a pretty handy tool to look at. Another one is going to be called RUGS recommendations, and that's going to be something that's less of a college search and more of a major search. So if you're looking for schools that have a particular major, say if you want to be an architect, you want to find schools that have quote unquote quality architecture programs. They go through and as best they can unbiasedly evaluate those architecture programs. Like with anything, there's always people's opinions and people, but they try to do it from a data-based, how many students matriculate, how many, what are some of the things, how many students get through in a certain fashion, certain way. So those are 2 areas in addition to like Naviance and College Board that we tend to turn towards.
What was the name of that last one?
The last one is called RUGS recommendations.
RUGS?
RUGG apostrophe, yes. That one's not in a book form. It's if you Google it, you'll go to a website and it'll let you download a PDF version of basically a book. I also have a little bit older version. It's like 2 or 3 years old, I think, in my office that I let people kind of make copies of if they wanted to. Jumping back into that junior college world for just a second, there's a major difference between, say, for example, a 4-year college admissions process and a junior college or 2-year college admissions process, which tends to be why we spend much more time speaking about a 4-year college admissions process, what that looks like, because it's much, much more intensive, much, much more competitive. 2-year colleges in general, I will say in general, because almost always if I say all of them, someone will find an exception to that rule. But most of them are non-competitive. Okay, they may have specific programs within a junior college that you might have to apply to specially, say a fire academy or EMT school or something like that. But in general, enrolling in a junior college is just that. It's an enrollment process. They will not deny you as long as typically you have some sort of high school education or equivalency, and typically are over 18 and I have a heartbeat. You have to be alive to go to school, believe it or not. But they're non-selective, which is important because that gives students a great opportunity to access that education that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. There are a large spectrum of students that go to junior college, from students that are graduating #1 in their high school class to students that are struggling to get past their English classes. Okay. One nice thing about that is it does create a nice diversity of students. There's a lot of different types of thought that happen in a junior college. There's a lot of I feel like the conversations that when I've seen classes at both levels, the conversations that I see at junior college level are so much more rich, I feel like, because there is a lot more stuff that goes into it. Whereas I feel like a lot of times the conversations at the 4-year college level, everyone's trying to outdo themselves and outdo each other and trying to use all these big words and logic and all this other stuff that really they probably don't have a whole ton of experience talking about. And they're just kind of talking for the sake of talking. Whereas the junior college, I feel like when I've had conversations with students or seen conversations in the classroom, it's much more real. And I think there's a lot more real kind of experiences that are happening in some of the classrooms. So it is a great option for any type of student. When they're applying, they're enrolling. They're not going to get denied typically. The main thing that I do caution people about, and I try to really, you'll hear it this year, you'll hear it next year, you'll hear it at our ILP meetings this year if you're looking at junior colleges, is while you can get in and you're pretty much guaranteed a spot in any of them you want to go to, you are not guaranteed spots in classes. Okay, so that's the big thing, and that's the big reason why sometimes if you look up junior colleges, sometimes they have a little bit of a bad reputation, not because they're poor at educating students, but because many times students, they tout that 2-year transfer process, that 60 transferable units, which hypothetically, if you're going to school full time, you can complete. that 2-year process many times becomes 3 or 4 years. Not because the student has done anything wrong, but because maybe they didn't take the right classes in the right sequence. Maybe the class filled up, and that was a prereq for Bio 102. And so that's another year that they have to wait to be able to get into those classes. So sometimes if not having that plan in place, and that's why working with one of those college counselors at a junior college is so crucial. It's because you have to have everything dialed in to really get through those courses at the right time. Because while they have open admissions, they might have 40,000 students on their books. They might only provide classes for half of those student spots. That's just a big thing just to be aware of. Some schools are a little bit better at that than others. Sierra College is a really good school regarding that component. So I'd encourage you guys to look at there. They're also our closest location. They have, anytime you see the word guaranteed, I'd be cautious about using the word guaranteed. Usually it's like, this is a pretty good thing. Typically it's not like you can do whatever you want. You're guaranteed to get into these schools. They have what they call guaranteed transfer programs, or AA-T programs, associate's degree for admission, for transfer admissions. And those are basically specific programs that you can take that help prepare you for that 4-year college transfer after that 2 years. Any questions about any of the junior college stuff?
Can you repeat your last statement?
The AA-T program, it's not new, but it's newer. Last probably 5 to 7 years, I would say. It's a new initiative. And so basically it's a program that 4-year college programs, typically at the CSU level, have kind of come together with their community college counterparts and come up with a plan of study for different majors. So they'll have like an AA-T for engineering. They'll have an AA-T for business. And so they'll basically, if a student successfully completes this breadth of courses, they're roughly guaranteed a spot at a CSU potentially, that's where it kind of gets tricky, is where it's not always the CSU of your choice. You can get into a CSU, that's the guarantee, but kind of with asterisk next to it. They can get in that way once they do that, kind of like typically with like a 3 average or better usually. But it does streamline that process for that transfer application process. I'm not an expert in the transfer application process. We don't really deal a ton with that here. We are going to be having a junior college information night, typically for our seniors, that I'll send it out to the junior class as well. Sometimes it's nice to get the information early on about some of that stuff. Christopher Old, who's the counselor from Sierra College, he also teaches some of the psychology classes. He joins me for that night. He actually leads much of that presentation. I'm kind of just here as to be the good-looking guy sitting in the chair. But I can give a little bit of insight in terms of our high school processes and stuff like that. But he kind of goes through some of the different things on the kind of system-wide junior college level, and some specifics about Sierra College as well. But that's going to be on October 4th. And we'll send some emails out about that. So the big question that I have right now that I usually get in junior year, students really start kind of like wanting to look into this, parents really starting to start wanting to get some specifics about this process. Some of the big stuff that I get is going to be, where do I start? Sophomore, junior year are good times to go visit schools. That's going to be the number one thing to kind of make or break schools for most students. If you are going on visits, I encourage you to email me or set up an appointment, come and see me. I have some good resources. So many times people say, I'm going on a visit, and they just kind of like stroll through campus and, oh, that's a cool building. That's a nice tree. There's some hot girls. Like, that's pretty much the student experience on a college trip. Parents are probably the ones asking all the right questions most of the time, but those lines of communication don't always cross. I have a couple resources that I can give you guys and some tips and pointers about how to make the most of any college visits. I always encourage you guys, if possible, to take their organized tours. It's sometimes a little bit more unpredictable in terms of like, if you guys don't know your schedule, or if you guys are kind of just rolling through town, decide to stop by, they might not have them available. Most of the larger schools will have them typically throughout the year, usually on a daily or a couple times a day basis. Sometimes it does require an appointment. Other times it's kind of just show up and join the group. And they have usually a student that will show you around campus in certain areas. One thing when working with your students, though, start out with a big question. Start out thinking very vaguely. We're not trying, many students want to, again, start with the end in mind and go like, I want to look at Berkeley, UCLA, and Stanford, and any other school that's just like that. Okay, they're kind of already starting out having certain things in mind, where there's over 5,000 schools across the country. Okay, they're thinking about 3, and really choosing their other options based on the 3 that they might know of, and most of the time they know about them because of their sports teams or because they made the news for some reason, or they have a family member that maybe went there. Okay, those are great schools, but many other schools are just as great, if not better, for your individual student. So I would encourage you guys, don't start with specific names and then compare other schools to those names. Start with some of these big picture questions like location. Believe it or not, that is the #1 thing that students tell me is why I added this school to my list. It's by the beach. It's far away from my parents. It's close to home. Things like that. Okay. They also look at who they know that have gone there before. Okay, that could be a brother or sister. It could be a friend that graduated last year. Sports teams that they're interested in going and watching football games at, or kind of like that level of prestige, that perceived level of like how good this school is. Which, you know, I don't want to discount prestige or name or brand and that kind of stuff, but in terms of things like getting jobs after school, getting internships, things like that, is generally not quite as important as you think. I don't know if I've told you guys this before, but a great book to buy and read over this next 2 years is a book called Where You Go Is Not Who You Are by Frank Bernay. He's an editor and a writer for, I think, the New York Times and Washington Post. And he goes through and he analyzes top politicians, top Fortune 500 companies, top physicians, and things like that, and goes and looks at and says, okay, where did these people, how did they get their start? Where did they go to school? Because everyone thinks all these guys went to Harvard and Yale and all these like hoity-toity schools, which are great schools, again, not slighting those schools, but that does not determine who you will become. And the book, I'm going to spoiler alert if you're going to read it, just plug your ears for a second, but most of the people that people think and view as successful, from presidents to congressmen, they went to junior college, they went to state schools, they went to all types of different schools. And it's less about the school that you go to and more about your personality traits, more about your tenacity and drive and perseverance than anything else. Okay, so while sometimes the name and that brand image can help in certain ways, sometimes like if you are looking at, say, medical school or law school, sometimes it can help grease some of the wheels a little bit. Okay, it's not going to typically make or break your student success level. It's more about how your student approaches their education through college. Parents, the big question I always get from you guys is, how much is this thing going to cost me? That should be a part of that list making process. But again, be wary of that sticker price that I kind of gave you the disclaimer of earlier. Don't look at those that have saucer eyes and say, this is not on your list, no way. Let them put it on their list. We kind of do things backwards where we apply and then figure out how much it's going to cost us later. So you might kind of nix this in your mind. They get in, and then you might actually find out that's your cheapest option. Okay, and so if you had nixed that off the bat, it might not have happened. It could have actually cost you more money to send your kid to school at a school that maybe not have been as happy at. I'll show you in just a second, and we're almost done, I promise. A way to kind of start tracking that. I've shared a Google Sheet with your students so they can actually download that and start doing that. I'll show you on the website in just a second. Using some of those tools we talked about, there's something called Supermatch College Search on their Naviance account, which is we'll be using that increasingly in their junior and senior year. They can set up appointments with me to start helping them look at it. Okay? I try to call them in kind of throughout the year at different times and work with them in smaller groups or individually. Like I said, we'll be doing another one of those individual learning plans with you guys, specifically together. But another great thing is we oftentimes, just like this college admissions case study, we get more schools that swing by our school than you think. Some of them more popular than others. Encourage your student to keep an eye on the calendar. Encourage your student to make time out of their day. Typically it's at lunch, so that's kind of, sometimes they're reluctant to give up their lunch period, to swing by and introduce themselves, pick up some information. Those colleges that swing by, they're doing two things. Number one, they're trying to give out information and inform your students or yourself. Okay, if anything, just tell them, pick me up something. Bring me home a pamphlet. I want to look at it. Like, even if you don't care, I care. And it makes them go by the table. But the other thing that it does is it tells you, we want your kids. Like, we want your students to come to our school. Okay, that's a big deal. And the hard part for us in education is like getting them here. Once they're here, as long as your students interact with them, they're going to have a good time. They're going to want to come back and spend time at our school, get to know our students, get to know us at the school. that also greases those admissions wheels. If we ever have issues with your student at a school that maybe has visited, I have a specific person I can call rather than a random phone number. The hard part is if we don't have students that swing by even the smaller schools, they don't come back. I say, this is a waste of time. Why are we going to Tahoe? They're too busy hanging out and going skiing and all this other fun stuff, like to talk to us. So please encourage us. It's kind of it's a hard thing because I want to give your students a break. Lunch is important. But I also want to encourage them to kind of make use of the information that comes out. So encourage them if you can to do that.
And did you say there's a list or? So
we post them on Naviance as well. So a lot of it will be on Naviance. So they can go,
and they can look
under colleges, and there's a college visit tab when you click on that. If students, for example, one thing I'll encourage students to do is as they're building their list of colleges in their brain, there's an area to list which schools you're looking at. So you just add them straight to Naviance. The nice thing is if a school that's on their list signs up for a visit, they're automatically going to get an email. So they'll say, hey, CU Boulder is going to be here on Friday or next month. Make sure that you put it on your calendar. So they'll automatically get information about when schools will be visiting us. PSAT is going to be happening next month, October 11th. That is the minimum day here at school. It's a test for all 10th and 11th graders. Once again, it's free. Thank you, TTUSD. So your students don't have to do anything to sign up. They just have to show up that day. Please don't schedule appointments as much as you can. If it's avoidable, please don't do that. It really there's not a makeup. Okay, so if your student gets pulled out halfway through the day, they take half the PSAT. So that's unfortunate for them and for everybody involved. So just if you have appointments on that day, again, it will only last us through that school day, through that 12-10 time. So if you can make them in the afternoon or something like that, but just try to avoid those dates if at all possible. The junior year is when they do get entered potentially into that National Merit Scholarship qualifying test, which for 99.9% of students means absolutely nothing. For typically the top percentage of students who score well, it can open up potentially some money options, some recognition options. It sometimes can be a benefit to add to college applications. We can deal with that if that's your student. Most students don't qualify. It's very, very difficult to qualify. You basically have to score perfectly on the PSAT. So if we do have any perfect scores in this group, we'll help you with that process. SATs will also start happening this year. Okay, so let's see, I think I got that up there. SATs will typically, most students start looking at SATs this year as juniors. They could take it as early as freshman year if they really wanted to. There's not a whole lot of use in that, in my opinion. But most start looking at it anywhere between that December timeframe and kind of January or February for taking their first kind of college preparatory exam. Okay, all of that process goes through the either test organization's website. Okay, so we don't test here. We don't register students through us here at the school. I can help if that's needed. It's usually pretty simple. They just need to either go to sat.org or act.org, I believe. And they'll select their test date. Registration deadlines are usually about a month in advance of the actual test date. So just know that piece. So like if you're like, I want to take the January SAT or whatever it is, be looking in like November or now to start registering. Some test sites. So again, we are not a test site here. So your closest, depending on the test date, will be sometimes in Squaw. Squaw Valley Academy is usually the closest one when they have it. They don't offer it every test date. And then down either in Carson, South Lake, or Reno is usually our closest locations for testing. So if you have a preference in terms of where you want to drive to, or you send your student to at 7 o'clock in the morning, it might behoove you to get registered sooner rather than later, so that the test center doesn't potentially fill up.
So is this the first year of the new SAT?
Nope.
It was last year.
So last year was so March 2016 was the first rollout of that. Last year was the first full year. And it's good. It's much better than.
I'm just reading the optional SAT essay. So
yeah, so that still exists.
That's new. Yeah, was that there?
Yep, that still exists.
Okay.
Yeah, so the main component that disappeared was they basically combined the reading, writing, and math. Math is still on its own. Reading and writing is technically, so it's kind of like 4 different sections with the optional essay, but there's 2 components: the math and the what they call evidence-based reading and writing, plus the optional essay. The essay I do encourage students to take each time they take the test. They're already there for 3 hours. Might as well spend another 50 minutes and get the test each time, the essay each time. Some schools will require it. Other schools will not consider it. Okay, so in my opinion, it's better to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it.
Is it scored separately now? Like,
Yeah.
Just because
So you'll get 3 different subs. You get 2 sub scores from each section in 800 chunks, and then you'll get a separate optional essay score that will go along with those scores as well. So it's back to, if you're familiar with the old, they change it every like 10 years or so. They just like to keep everyone on their toes, I guess. 2400 used to be what it was. Now it's back to 1600. I think I took it in high school when it was kind of towards that end of that 1600 original phase, and then moved to 2400. Another big change with that revision in 2016 that has changed since is going to be there's no penalty for wrong answers. So guess. If you're close to being done and out of time, might as well get a few bonus points out of that. Where in the past, you used to actually get marked down for incorrect answers, 1/4 of a point, and nothing if you left it blank and omitted it. So that's a big change. And there's a couple different content area changes that you'll notice too. Like it's going to be less like analogies, random facts and trivia that no one needs to know in real life. So this comes straight from College Board, where they say, and they'll tell you, the best way to actually prepare for the SAT is to actually focus and paying attention in school. Just like with the AP program, it's going to capitalize on all of your learning throughout high school. So if there's ever any reason to kind of like, if your kid is focused on those colleges, if they say like, I just want to, I want to go to college, I want to get into a good college, tell them like you need to pay attention in school, because they're going to be testing you on this. And that's going to be a major component of getting into maybe the school of your dreams. There are some tips and tricks that we use, but in general, most students at this point really should be focusing on really getting the meat and potatoes out, especially out of their English and math classes. But they do see science, they do see history come up in more like connected ways. So they don't have a science test, but they will ask questions that you have to understand maybe a little bit about a science component to understand how to answer that question. The other piece is going to be, so Khan Academy, any of you guys know Khan Academy? It's mainly used for math primarily. They've expanded it quite a bit to other subject areas. They are the official partner for test prep. So if you do want to kind of go through a test prep program, Mr. Fleesock, our new science teacher, he is a pretty awesome, I'm going to be tapping him on the shoulder. He used to teach SAT prep coursework. So that used to be kind of like his side gig. So I'm going to be working with him this year and kind of milking his knowledge out of his brain about some of this stuff, about stuff that he did with students. But there is some merit to prepping and practicing. These questions are not always straightforward. It's really more about the understanding of how the test actually works that you'll tend to get out of the prep work. Khan Academy is a great resource. It's all online, completely free, and they're an official College Board partner. ACT has some test prep embedded in our Naviance program that you can access. That's also online and free. ACT is fairly similar. They have a different scoring structure. Most of our students here tend to gravitate towards the SAT. It's usually something that we typically can't fully support both, so we kind of pick one and dive deeper into that one. It's also a little bit closer, more closely embedded in things like our English classes, and since we're also heavily tied to things like AP, it has more of a connection in that sense. ACT does have a science component to it, so like sometimes students are very strong science students, and I do encourage students to try both and maybe pick one that they feel more strongly on or score better on early on. Colleges will take both hand in hand. We typically, there we go, read through that a little bit. So they do have the 5 components versus just the 2 in the optional essay. The main thing to consider is going to be one, date. So again, they're going to be on Saturdays. Okay, so you have to look at your weekends. That's where planning ahead kind of comes into it. They typically alternate Saturdays. You're typically never going to see an SAT and an ACT offered on the same date. The SAT did also just open up a August test date. So if you wanted your student to potentially test in the summertime this coming summer, they could do an August test date as well. We are working on finalizing some plans for our junior class to bring in kind of like a more in-person SAT prep program. we're kind of like debating it and kind of planning out budget wise who we're going to bring in. We brought in a guy in the past. He's been really great. We're kind of just looking and seeing maybe we should try something else, kind of compare our options and see what's out there. So we're going to see, we're trying to set that up, probably looking if we can get everything ironed out and trying to book them sometime either mid to late November or early December. And it's something we have to also finalize kind of who it's going to, how many students we can afford to provide it for, but it will be only for juniors. And typically, we're probably going to open up to anyone that wants to sign up, but we'll encourage students typically probably with a certain GPA or higher that most likely will get the most bang for their buck spending a couple of days or a couple of hours in an SAT prep course. Any questions about any of the test stuff? We can kind of see if there's talked about this. That. We kind of talked through most of this stuff. Let me see if there's anything I really missed. In junior pathways, they'll be working on kind of jumping back to a little bit of that career prep stuff. So they'll be working on resumes, cover letters, interviews, things like that, as well as some of the college preparatory stuff. So you'll see some of that. Junior pathways, I will say, and if any of my other teachers are watching this, junior pathways is probably our strongest pathways curriculum. It's kind of that it kind of is that pinnacle where senior year is a lot of college, a lot of like end of high school stuff. Senior projects run through that. And then 9th and 10th grade, kind of it's that ramping up, getting students those abilities. That 11th grade is where I feel like we are most dialed in. So I think your students will really enjoy their pathways experience this year, and they'll come away with a lot of information. I believe it's the Monday of that Thanksgiving break week. They changed the date on this. I don't love that it's this week. But we're also doing the junior resource fair where the juniors who happen to come to school that week will get to go, and it's an opportunity to get to experience a bunch of different stuff. I don't even have all the final details yet because we're not in charge of it anymore. So I'm going to get some more information about that later, but just keep that word in your mind, junior resource fair. It's a pretty cool activity that we'll go over a little bit more fully with some more information that's to come.
And what is the basis of it? Like
the resource fair?
Yeah.
So think of it like a little mini conference. So we bring in, if it's anything like it has been in the past, typically they're in small groups. It's us, Truckee, Incline, all the juniors, basically from the Tahoe Basin. They all come together in one spot, and basically they get assigned little groups, probably about 10 or 15 students per group. And there's 10 stations essentially that they kind of make their way around, where they'll have, for example, Sierra College comes and does a college prep one. One of our other counseling colleagues do a gap year presentation. Okay. Financial aid, the bank folks come and do a financial aid or finances, what's credit, and all this other stuff presentation. They have 2 rooms that are like little, almost like mini little job fairs where like PUD comes and talks about their jobs. The Marines, the police department, doctors, chefs kind of come and set up little, like, call them roaming rooms. They kind of wander around, ask questions, get information about different jobs. Students actually tend to like it. It can be exhausting by the end of the day, but they all come back reporting that they enjoyed it and they learned a lot. HR comes and talks about, like, they always come and dress up all funny because, like, would you wear this to an interview? Things like that. And everyone's like, yeah, I'd wear that.
And is it just that Monday?
Yeah, and
it's just that one day.
I'm pretty sure it's that Monday of that week. It used to be in April, and we changed it for some reason. Not my call.
During the school day?
Yes, so they'll show up to school. We'll bus them over there. Usually it's at the event center. I'm pretty sure it's going to be there again. But again, it's kind of been taken out of our hands, and the information is a little bit slow coming. So we're still waiting on some of that. But yeah, it should to be expected of some information out to you guys on that. Again, talked about some of this stuff. AP test, just a reminder, we do not require it. We encourage it if you're going to feel like you're pretty confident in the course. In years past, we've had teachers say, oh, if you take the AP test, we'll let you not take a final. Can almost guarantee that's not going to happen this year. So don't expect that. We've had some conversations about that, and we don't feel like that is a very good incentive, because then we just get students basically making their parents pay money, sitting their butt in a seat, causing problems in AP tests and not passing that thing. And so it doesn't help anybody, basically. And so don't expect that to happen this year. And I think, I'm not clicking any further. I think that's it. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an overview, kind of what this year looks like going into next year. Does anybody have any major questions that you want me to talk about or look at this year that kind of has been standing out or you're dying to ask?
Is there a college fair or something coming up in September this month?
Next month in October on the 3rd and Truckee.
Okay.
So Truckee hosts, we kind of, it's with colleges and college fairs and that kind of stuff, it's a little difficult to get a large group up here multiple times. So we don't try to separate that out. I'm very happy to let them do all the work and let us send our kids over there. They also have a little bit larger facility to be able to do that and some of the backing to make that happen. I want to say it starts at 4:30 or 5 in Truckee on the 3rd, which is a Tuesday evening. And I'll send some emails out about that as well. It should be on our calendar, which I do want to show you really quickly. So let me pull up my website and just really quickly, in 2 minutes or less, walk you through a few resources.
About how many schools go to that college fair?
25 or 30.
And is it mostly California schools or?
It's all over the place. When we get reps, they're pretty diverse. So we do send a lot of students to some of our East Coast schools, so Vermont and Montana and places in Michigan. A lot of the students that look at skiing, like they really try to come out. But we'll get a lot of CSUs and UCs will typically come out. And sometimes we'll get a few of the more popular private schools to swing by. I don't have a list yet of who's scheduled to attend. So let me show you this real quick, and I'll show you 3 places to check for a few resources that'll be helpful throughout this year. All right, and if you're watching this on TV, I'm sorry, you're bouncing around. So on this website, so you can see my mouse. So if you ever wanted to find our YouTube page, you can click there. It's a very easy way to do it. If you scroll down, it's always going to be here as well. If you ever don't make a meeting, those should be up there within probably 24 hours or so of one of the 2 meetings that we typically have. Naviance links for your students are there as well, plus a quick button to make an appointment. Up here, there's a few quick links. This is going to be a place where I know that students or parents typically use links. I try to put them all into one spot. So again, appointment Naviance. This is what we're calling month at a glance. Okay, and this is something new we started this year. Lisa Dolberg actually brought this to us, and she had a great idea of wanting to do this from working with another counselor at a different school. But basically, we break it up by year. So if we go to like the junior year, what's going to happen is you'll be able to see our school's calendar all in one place. So you could see, for example, if we're talking about RTI sessions, say test prep, it would be on here just like today's RTI session on college essays. It would have things like junior fall meeting, like you're sitting at right now, and AddDrop deadline, other information that might be helpful that you can look at a glance. We also list, and this will be updated every month, a couple goals for the students to work on. Okay, so this is helpful for you as a parent to know what your student should be kind of focusing on, but also as the student, we're trying to encourage them to do that. So I encourage them to attend this meeting or watch it on YouTube, get into Naviance and at least research 1 or 2 potential options for college or career. Different social emotional. So these 3 areas are our 3 counseling domains. So these are the 3 areas that we as school counselors work on. So that's kind of where the areas we're pulling from. Okay, social emotional is more about how you're feeling. What are you doing? How are you getting through life? How are you maintaining? How are you excelling in your kind of personal life and your feelings and your interactions with others? So encouraging them to get involved, say, for example, in a club or a sport. Whether or not you want to play a sport, it's usually a good thing. You get to make new friends, you're active, all these types of things. And then we'll put some parent tips and opportunities. Okay, so for example, plan to attend a college visit or career shadow sometime during this year. Again, helping set up their environment at home so it's conducive to learning. And that sometimes means being mean, like saying no TV in your room. That's not how it works. So that's a good place to look, and each grade level has that. They're a little bit different by each grade level. So if you have other grade students in other grades, that's a great place. Our school profile sometimes is a nice thing to familiarize yourself with. That's a document that we update every single year with latest information that goes along with many of your students' college applications. All right, so I'd encourage you guys potentially to check that out. Just familiarize yourself with it, because colleges do reference it when we're looking at it. And over here under the counseling support area, there are 3 different domains as well. So if you're interested in like academics, so like if you want to look at their course selection or course catalog, credit remediations options if your kid got a D or an F, other things about social emotional counseling. So if you're looking for a therapist or a counselor in the area, there's a mental health directory that you can access. Information on our What's Up wellness checks. This one is usually, as you're getting into that junior or senior year, it's usually the one that you're going to typically find yourself using more often. the college and career area, so that you can hover over these things and click on all these different options. But if you just click on here, there's a few resources that are directly linked. So this college app spreadsheet is one of them. I don't know if it's going to let me pull it up. I think I have it set to make a copy. So I don't think I can necessarily pull that one up right now. Your student will be able to. Some of these are going to be limited to what your student can pull up because it's tied to a TTUSD email account, but your student can pull up and make a copy for you if you wanted a parent copy. A couple reasons why we do this. Number one is some of these are things that I've created and actually sell to other school counselors. So I put up on my website. It's free for everybody. And number two is it is something also that I fully believe that this process is a student-driven process. So I want the student to be the one having full control. So I'm limiting it to student email accounts for that main reason. I encourage you, if you want to sit down next to your student, not a bad thing. If you want to say, hey, why don't we go pull this up together? It's not a bad thing either. This document basically has a bunch of different headers at the top, and you have spaces in a spreadsheet style to add different schools. And each header is going to have little different data points that you can hop on to Big Future. You can hop on to Navient and start plugging these things in. It helps you at a glance compare your different schools together, from admissions rates to deadlines to if they require essays or recommendations. And so as they do that, it's a great place to start plugging things in, because what you'll find out is as students do research for anything really, career, college, cars, whatever it is, they're going to spend some time online. They're going to find some good information. They don't write it down. They'll go away for a week and don't remember a single thing that they just spent 2 hours doing. Okay, 2 hours well spent. But if you don't remember what you looked at, it's not very helpful. The senior profile is something they'll access next year. The college cost estimator is typically something that I would encourage after that college admissions process, but it's a great tool. You can also plug it in if you're like starting to do a little bit of research about costs and finances, but usually it's best spent. It will tally up all of your financial aid options, plus like see how much it's actually going to cost you at the end of the book. This, and there's another area that this is a really good guide that I recently was published and sent to us by a group of college professionals. I would encourage you guys, check it out. It's a great tool for students and parents that kind of walks you through now to college at a glance. So it's called the Fair Opportunity College Guide. There's also, I have a couple other guides, one that I've kind of shambled together. This is much more professionally put together than mine is, but there's a couple other that I also use that if you guys are looking for resources, if you guys want help, if you want note paper that has questions to ask as you go to a college visit, that's likely in one of these resource books. Okay. And then finally, these resources, again, the grade level resource recommendations, we're going to be working on adding also book recommendations. So different things that we feel like either parents or students might get some benefit of if you're into reading. I know that's not always the case, even for us adults, mostly not because we don't like to, because we feel like our time is limited. So, but if you like to read and you want to start reading about some of these different things, we're going to try to start posting some different books that either we've read or we've had colleagues that have read that have said that these are going to be really good for you or your parents or your students to look through. Okay, so just make yourself available. There's information about our wellness center along on there as well. We try to put a bunch of information on here to help you guys out. So please utilize it. If you don't see something you want to see, please ask me. I can always add it. I have full editing rights to this website. So I can go on and add things or change things. If you're like, I can never find this one thing. Like, can you just put a quick link to that one area? Sure, I'll do that. Just make sure you guys ask. So anything you guys need, okay, that's our job. That's why we're here. First and foremost, your students. Second and foremost is you guys as parents. So anything that helps you guys be more successful, feel like you're better off, that's our purpose. Okay. Do you guys have any questions about anything other than kind of what we covered tonight? Yes.
Well, I missed the title of the book from that Frank Bernay.
Frank Bernay. It's called, and sometimes I mix it up.
Where you go is not who you'll be.
Yes.
Where you go. Okay.
Where you go is not who you are.
Who you'll be.
Yeah. I always mix it up a little bit. Where you go is, yes, where you go is not who you'll be. That is correct. It's a really good book. I would encourage you to check it out. It's your student might not want to read the whole thing, but if you want to like cliff note a couple pages or a chapter for them to look at, it would be a good read for them too. Because again, it's usually parents that start the idea of like you have to go to a college sometimes to kind of like be acceptable in my eyes sometimes, but it's not always the case. And so like having them understand like who you go, where you go does not change how I feel about you. It does not change that I love you. It does not change that you're my child. That can take a lot of pressure off of your kid. And so having them understand that and having them say, hey, this is what we believe. We're going to support you either way. You know, we have some ideas of what we would like to see and what we think you're capable of, but if you don't want to do that, that doesn't change who you are. Any other questions? Yes.
The free SAT prep, is that the one through Khan Academy?
So that is the online one, yes. So that'll be through Khan Academy. The one that we eventually, hopefully, crossing my fingers, bring into the school will also be free. It'll be covered by our district plus some money from PTO. So we're looking at making some options there. Yeah, so donate to PTO. They do a lot of great stuff.
Will that happen this year?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as everything works the way we want it to. We're just we're trying to nail down which program. One's a little bit more pricey than the other one. I feel like the pricier one provides a little bit more, I think, support. It will actually provide like 2 days of kind of 3 hours, which is a little more digestible for students, plus a full-length SAT practice test. So we're looking at that. If we can make it work with the money, I think that's the direction we'll go. But we have a plan either way. It's just trying to line up all the pieces together. Yes.
Did you talk about nominations at the very beginning of the meeting?
Not a ton.
I have a question.
Sure.
About, do you guys use it?
I used it a
don't
lot
know.
with Ingrid. I have not been able to get him in there as much as he should be now. But it was
Yeah,
really
so
helpful earlier.
with
Do you have to
Naviance,
set up a parent account? Is that-
there is a way.
Never got it.
The district has put a lot of time and energy into kind of changing a few things that have to do with mostly with Aries. Nothing with Naviance really. It's more about our student information system communicating with Naviance, which in the past has not really been able to happen, to be able to easily create and support parent accounts. Unless you guys specifically ask me for them, I can individually create them. This year, I believe we have enough to make that happen. So we're working on trying to make sure that we do that. And so we're trying to figure out the best way to get that information out to you guys. So we're working on it. It's just a large undertaking. But yes, there's a way to get a parent account. If any of you guys or any of you guys on YouTube want your own account now, simply all you have to do is shoot me an email with basically the big thing was an email account tied to a parent that we couldn't easily pull.
Can we get in through the kids' account?
You can. I would encourage you to do, if you don't mind sending me an email, I can very easily set you up one. It limits what you can do a little bit. You can use all the same research tools, but it doesn't let you like change a student's college application list. It doesn't let you like do a few things that the student would be able to do, which we would encourage that the student should be doing. Too often do I see parents doing it and not the student doing it, which is helpful sometimes, but not necessarily the goal that we're looking for. So yeah, but we're working on that piece with the parent account in particular. It's a big focus for this year, making that happen. Any other questions? Those are great questions. Otherwise, thank you guys for coming. Good luck out there in the rain and the winds and potential snow. And we will be doing that junior college night. If you are interested in coming, I'll include the junior class in that email on October 4th. College admissions case study on Saturday. Please register if you want to attend that. And then October 3rd is the college fair in Truckee. Those are the major upcoming events. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I have a recommendation. Now,